Here is why reconciliation is not working, and will likely never work. The fundamental problem is the difference between Aboriginal common sense and Australian logic. Aboriginal understanding of reconciliation includes truth-telling about past and ongoing injustices. Includes strong, respectful relationships free from racism. Includes closing gaps in health, education, justice, and economic outcomes. Includes governments, organizations, and institutions actively supporting reconciliation. And a shared national identity that includes and honors Aboriginal people. But Australian understanding of reconciliation starts with, let's agree to disagree. And continue to do it our way, and/or return to the romancing of Australian life that serves the idea that we own the land. And allows us to believe that Aboriginal people never lived anywhere other than in the middle of Australia and should go back there, out of sight. And it lets us deport everyone else that is not white, and/or who isn't willing to gratefully give up their heritage and completely accept Aussie life and racist attitudes. Now let's get into the actual problems. First problem. The very word itself, reconciliation, normally implies returning to a previous state of harmony. The English word, reconcile, means to restore friendly relations. For Aboriginal people, there was no prior relationship with colonizers that was peaceful, or equal, or consensual. The arrival of the British brought violent frontier conflict, land theft, forced removals, suppression of language and culture, legal doctrines that denied Indigenous existence. There is no earlier era to return to. This is why many Aboriginal thinkers argue that the term reconciliation is linguistically and historically flawed. So why was the term adopted anyway? When the reconciliation movement began in the early 1990s, the term was chosen because it was politically acceptable to governments at the time. It sounded non-confrontational to the broader public. But the critique remains, you cannot reconcile a relationship that never existed. Second problem. To achieve complete reconciliation, Australia would likely need to reimagine its symbols, including national flag, national anthem, Australia Day, and even the country's name. Also reform its institutions, including law, governance, and education. And also recognize First Nations sovereignty as foundational, not supplementary. The flag question. Replacing both the Australian and Aboriginal flags with a single new design would symbolically declare a shared future, not two separate histories. However, it would also mean retiring a powerful emblem, the Aboriginal flag, a hard-won symbol of survival, identity, and resistance. Many Aboriginal people now see the Aboriginal flag as non-negotiable because it represents sovereignty that predates the nation itself. A new flag could only succeed if it were co-designed by Aboriginal people and formally recognized as sovereign, not imposed as a unity gesture. Changing the anthem. The national anthem, Advance Australia Fair, reflects colonial optimism and excludes Indigenous perspectives. A new anthem could use Aboriginal languages and celebrate country, kinship, and shared stewardship. Replace the colonial narratives. These changes would be deeply symbolic. It would redefine what the country sings about itself. Reimagining the country's National Day. This is already one of the most contested issues. January 26th marks the arrival of the First Fleet, for many, Invasion Day. Changing the date, or the meaning, would be a foundational act of truth-telling, acknowledging that the nation began with dispossession. Some propose a new day of unity, perhaps tied to treaty signing or sovereignty recognition. Renaming the country. The name Australia comes from Terra Australis, Latin for southern land, coined by European explorers. Renaming the country would be the most significant step, symbolizing complete decolonization. Possible directions include dual naming, reflecting coexistence, Indigenous naming, using a term from one of the major language groups, or even conceptual renaming, all of which would require constitutional change and a national referendum, but it would mark a true break from colonial identity. Third problem. Several illogical or internally inconsistent ideas keep blocking reconciliation, not because people disagree, but because the arguments themselves don't make sense when examined closely. These contradictions create political paralysis, public confusion, and emotional defensiveness that block meaningful progress. Here are the most important ones. Wanting reconciliation without truth-telling. Many Australians say they support reconciliation, but resist teaching full frontier violence history. Acknowledging massacres. Accepting that sovereignty was never ceded, and confronting ongoing structural racism. This is logically impossible. You cannot reconcile a relationship while refusing to acknowledge what broke it. It's like wanting forgiveness without admitting harm. believing equality can exist without equity. A common argument is, everyone should be treated the same. But Aboriginal people were not treated the same for 236 years, so treating everyone equally now simply preserves inequality. Equality without equity is mathematically incapable of closing gaps. Thinking symbolic gestures equal structural change. People often believe wearing a shirt, posting a hashtag, attending a morning tea, doing an acknowledgement of country is doing reconciliation. These are symbolic. They do not change incarceration rates, child removal rates, land ownership, political power, health outcomes, economic inequality. Symbols without structural reform create the illusion of progress while nothing changes. Expecting Aboriginal people to fix a problem they didn't create. Governments often say, we need Indigenous communities to lead the solutions. Yes, but only after structural barriers are removed. It is illogical to expect Aboriginal people to fix laws they didn't write, systems they didn't design, institutions built to exclude them, economic disadvantages imposed on them. Reconciliation requires non-Indigenous Australia to change its systems, not just ask Aboriginal people to work harder. Wanting reconciliation without giving up power. Many Australians say they support reconciliation, but oppose treaty, truth commissions, land back, shared governance, constitutional reform, or changing national symbols. This is contradictory. Reconciliation requires shifting power, because colonization was the act of taking power. You cannot reconcile while keeping all the benefits of colonization intact. Claiming the past is the past while celebrating colonial history. Some argue, we shouldn't dwell on the past. Yet Australia celebrates Anzac history, preserves colonial buildings, honors explorers, teaches British settlement as national identity, and marks Australia Day on the date colonization began. It is illogical to say history doesn't matter only when it's Aboriginal history. Believing reconciliation is a feeling, not a measurable outcome. People often treat reconciliation as goodwill, friendliness, getting along, cultural awareness. But reconciliation is measurable: life expectancy, incarceration rates, child removal, land ownership, political representation, and economic participation. If these metrics don't improve, reconciliation isn't happening, regardless of how many people feel supportive. Assuming Aboriginal people are one group with one opinion. This leads to token consultation, one-size-fits-all policy, misunderstanding of nationhood, and ignoring local law and governance. It is illogical to treat hundreds of sovereign nations as a single cultural bloc. Expecting reconciliation to be quick. Some Australians say, why aren't we done yet? But reconciliation requires undoing 236 years of dispossession, 150 years of frontier conflict, 100 years of protection acts, 60 years of assimilation policy, and ongoing structural inequality. It is illogical to expect centuries of harm to be repaired in a generation. The core contradiction. Australia wants the benefits of reconciliation, unity, pride, international respect, without the costs of reconciliation, truth, power sharing, structural reform, and confronting colonial foundations. This is the single biggest illogical barrier. However, there are those barriers that go far beyond illogical, unto being absolutely ridiculous. Blatant racism. Racism is not just morally wrong, it is logically incompatible with reconciliation. Reconciliation requires respect, equality, recognition of sovereignty, shared nationhood, and truth-telling. Racism denies all of these. It says, I want reconciliation, but I refuse to see you as equal. That is a contradiction. Racism also creates denial of history, hostility toward truth-telling, resistance to structural reform, fear of sharing power, and dismissal of Aboriginal nationhood. You cannot reconcile with someone you refuse to see as fully human. Arrogance. Arrogance shows up as, we already do enough. We know what's best for you. Your issues aren't as important as ours. You should be grateful for what you have. This is illogical because reconciliation requires listening, humility, and learning. Arrogance blocks all three. It also assumes the colonizer knows more about the colonized, the dominant group understands the oppressed better than they understand themselves, and the people harmed should accept whatever the dominant group decides. This is not just morally flawed, it is logically impossible. You cannot repair a relationship while insisting you are always right. Intentional ignorance. This is one of the most damaging barriers. Intentional ignorance includes refusing to learn history, avoiding uncomfortable truths, pretending colonization was benign, ignoring evidence of inequality, rejecting indigenous knowledge systems, and refusing to acknowledge sovereignty. It is illogical because reconciliation requires truth. You cannot reconcile with someone while deliberately avoiding the truth of what happened to them. Intentional ignorance is a choice, and choosing not to know is choosing not to reconcile. Lastly, straight-up white supremacy. This is not simply another barrier to reconciliation, it is one of the deepest, most corrosive, and most illogical negative forces. And it operates differently from everyday racism, arrogance, or intentional ignorance. It is a system of beliefs that actively resists reconciliation because reconciliation threatens its core assumptions. White supremacy assumes racial hierarchy. White supremacy denies indigenous sovereignty because it contradicts colonial legitimacy. White supremacy requires ignorance to survive. White supremacy frames equality as loss. White supremacy creates emotional defensiveness that blocks rational discussion. It triggers reactions like, "I'm not racist." "Stop blaming white people." "It wasn't my fault." "Why should I apologize?" "We already do enough." "They need to move on." These responses are emotional shields, not logical arguments. They protect identity, not truth. Reconciliation requires maturity, whereas supremacy encourages fragility. White supremacy relies on myths that collapse under scrutiny. White supremacy is threatened by indigenous excellence. The core contradiction. White supremacy wants colonial power, colonial identity, colonial symbols, colonial narratives, and colonial privilege. But also wants peace, unity, and national pride. These desires contradict each other. You cannot maintain supremacy and achieve these at the same time. With all that has been said here about reconciliation, now you know why it is not working and likely never will. But wait. Perhaps it is. Perhaps it is not about achieving the ultimate nation of harmony and unity, a utopia, but rather, reconciliation is a mechanism for regulating the systems in place and the people so the nation does not collapse under its own lies. Regardless of whether it's working as intended or not, we must continue despite the barriers. Reconciliation is not optional, it is the ongoing work of truth-telling, justice, and rebuilding relationships that were never allowed to form properly. Even if some people believe reconciliation cannot be achieved, abandoning it would mean accepting inequality, accepting silence, and accepting the unfinished harm of colonization. Reconciliation is not a destination, it is a commitment. A commitment to honesty. A commitment to respect. A commitment to change. A commitment to each other. Even when the path feels unreachable, the act of walking it is what transforms the nation. Continuing reconciliation, or whatever name we give to truth, justice, and shared future, is how this country becomes that which it claims to be. Most importantly, remember this. Australia is built on top of hundreds of sovereign nations that never disappeared, only went unrecognized. Understanding this is essential to any conversation about justice, reconciliation, or the future of the country.